Simpsons predicted that May 30th, 2025 is the day everything comes to a stop. A simple coincidence or a warning we shouldn't ignore. In a long-forgotten episode from 1998, titled The Last Day of Springfield, a massive blackout throws the entire city into darkness. No lights, no cars, the city is completely frozen. Even Homer's nuclear power plant shuts down. Just before everything cuts out, a digital calendar flashes one last time. May 30th. Professor Frank runs around screaming and flailing his arms. It's the end, while Kent Brockman stares straight into the camera with a chilling smile. Back to the Stone Age, but it doesn't stop there. The 2013 episode, Mr. Burns drops an eerie line. The end of energy has already been scheduled. Too many coincidences. Hold on. In a 2007 episode, Lisa holds a book titled The Last Day of Civilization. And on the cover, the date, May 30th, 2025. A global blackout, a full collapse of the internet, or maybe...
Glamham.
It was actually insane how much that looks like Trump.
Well, I must agree. And I have something interesting to share too, because I love looking at clouds. In fact, it does sometimes get me in a bit of trouble because I seem to have a knack for finding shapes in clouds, especially around Bouvet Island. Now, you wouldn't think this cloud would have anything to do with Bouvet Island, but just bear with me as we peruse some of my collection of satellite images of Bouvet, like these strange white lights around Bouvet. And I mean, it is the most remote island in the world. But what do we have here? Does this cloud look like someone as well? Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the comments. Take care.
Had the opportunity over the years to interview, again, people who have worked at the test site at Groom Lake. One gentleman spent 12 of his 30 years in black programs at Groom Lake. When I asked him, I said, first of all, I said, do you believe in UFOs? And he looked at me with a straight face in one-on-one. He said, absolutely, positively, they do exist. I said, can you expand upon that? He said, no, I can't. About a year later, we were talking about, again, activities at Groom Lake, and I asked him, I said, you know, can you really tell me what's happening out there? And he said, well, there's a lot of things that are going on there that I won't be able to tell you until the year 2025. But we have things in the Nevada desert that would make George Lucas envious.
You better wake up and find out has been around you all of your life. You just didn't see it. Example, Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. John Kennedy was elected to Congress 1946. Abe Lincoln was elected president in 1860. John Kennedy was elected president 1960. The names Lincoln and Kennedy both contain 7 letters. Both presidents were particularly concerned with civil rights. Both of the president's wives lost children while living in the White House. Both presidents were shot on a Friday in the head. President Lincoln's secretary was named Miss Kennedy. Kennedy's secretary was named Miss Lincoln. Both were assassinated by Southerners. Both were succeeded by Southerners. Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Lincoln, was born in 1808. Lyndon Johnson, who succeeded Kennedy, was born in 1908. John Wilkes Booth, who assassinated Lincoln, was born in 1839. Lee Harvey Oswald, who assassinated Kennedy, in 1939. Both assassins were known by three names: John Wilkes Booth, Lee Harvey Oswald. Both names are comprised of 15 letters. President Lincoln was shot in a theater named Ford. Kennedy was shot in a car named Lincoln, made by Ford. John Wilkes Booth ran to a theater and was caught in a warehouse. Oswald ran from a warehouse and was caught in a theater. Booth and Oswald were both assassinated before they could go to trial. And a week before Lincoln was shot, he was in Monroe, Maryland. A week before Kennedy was shot, he was with Marilyn Monroe.
Might want to be caffeinated for this one. BlackRock's been on a roll lately. Today they said that the US dollar is at risk of losing its world reserve currency status to Bitcoin. Let me explain what that really means, because it's massive. Right now, the US dollar is the global reserve currency. That means that countries around the world hold it, they trade in it, and they rely on it to keep their economy stable. It also gives the US global control over money. But here's the problem. During COVID, the US printed over 40% of all US dollars in existence in just a couple years. That's more than was printed in the past 20 years before that, combined. That's inflation. That's why everything costs more, and that's why the trust in the dollar is fading worldwide. Now, Bitcoin fixes this. There's only a 21 million supply, ever. You can't print more, you can't manipulate it, and no single government controls it. And that's why BlackRock is saying that Bitcoin can replace the US dollar as the world's most trusted asset. Now, if that happens, the entire system flips. Trade deals can be settled in Bitcoin. Central banks holding Bitcoin instead of US dollars. And retail investors like you and me holding the future before the world catches up. Bitcoin was mocked for years, and now the most powerful institution in the world, BlackRock, who has its claws in everything, is warning that it could replace the US dollar. Now the question is, are you finally going to pay attention? Don't forget to follow me, guys. I'm breaking it all down before it hits headlines.
Government due to me once I'm in my grade. 6 months later, she died. It's 1955 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And Mrs. G, who worked in the Forward Materials Division, was given an incredible task of cataloging 1,000 components that came in from the interior of a UFO crash retrieval. Now, the way they had this thing set up is when these pieces of debris came into the base, there was an assembly line. One station had a gentleman with a photographic camera, and he was taking still pictures of the debris. Then it moved on to the next station where there was a gentleman who was bagging and tagging these components. It finally moved over to Mrs. G, and she cataloged, believe it or not, 1,000 components that came in from a crash retrieval. We've heard all this talk about senators and congressmen not having the physical evidence. Well, Mrs. G actually held this physical evidence. Not only that, a few minutes into her job, she saw a mobile device go right by her typewriter workstation, and there were two ET bodies about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, oversized head, oversized eyes, slit for a mouth, minute nose. They were being preserved in a formaldehyde type chemical liquid as this thing goes right by. She saw this. Now, one thing I want to mention is that whenever you hear senators and congressmen talk about this, they don't have a need to know, and they have not been briefed or read into these programs, and that's the problem we're running into. So when researchers got to Mrs. G and they did a very interesting interview with her, basically she said, what can the government do to me once I'm in my grade? 6 months later, she died, so she should be considered a hero and an American patriot.
He's got top secret clearance, and he found the Immaculate Constellation Project, basically a PowerPoint presentation. And his job was just to sort these files. And he's looking through it, and suddenly it's like, whoa, this is about recovery and alien craft. And he did the right thing and went to his superiors and said, you know, there's a leakage. I saw information I maybe wasn't supposed to. I'm just letting you know. And his superiors were like, forget about it. And he's like, and that was it. It just no reprimand, no nothing. I just went back to work. But he was too fascinated by the document, so he kept pursuing it and pursuing it. And now he talks about it. I don't know his name, but if you track down, Jeremy and George, you'll find it easily. That's the kid.
Yeah. So here's a way that I would kind of try to debunk that if I was being logical. If I was the government and I did have some very sophisticated propulsion system that's beyond the understanding of what we think to be current state-of-the-art physics, like far beyond that, I think I might release a bunch of horse shit about UFOs.
100%.
Yeah, I might put a bunch of that stuff out there to say, oh, it can't be ours. It's not ours. It's not of this world.
Muddy the waters.
Yeah, not just that, but attach like really kooky stuff to stuff that's real so that you think the real stuff is kooky.
Right, like the drone scare. Remember that? That was very manufactured, and the press was all over it. We don't know where the drones are. They're all flying over the military bases, all of that stuff.
What do you think that was?
I know what it was. I've seen the NOTAM reports. You know what a NOTAM is?
No.
That's a notice to airmen. So pilots, private pilots, get warning of no-fly zones. And usually you'll see a lot of swaths carved out if like Air Force One's flying through. But for some reason, these NOTAM reports have all these little circles all around that you can't fly through where the drones were. And I've seen that. And when did the drones, they suddenly stopped? When?
Right.
Right before Inauguration Day.
Yeah.
And no one talks about the drones anymore.
Yeah, it's gone.
Gone.
I mean, it was mainstream news all over the place.
And they had people nervous.
Yeah.
They had them nervous, and I think that was the point.
So you think they did it as a psyop just
Yes.
to see how people would react?
I do. And remember, I know nothing.
Right.
But that is my opinion, is that it was a psyop. And that most of this is.
If there are visitors, and there are from somewhere else, wouldn't the best way to prepare us is to start flying a bunch of like really wacky shit that we have in the air and not explain it?
That would be a good way to prepare us.
Where are they getting the fluoride?
So water fluoridation, the fluoride that they get is a byproduct of the phosphate fertilizer industry. And it's called hydrofluorosilicic acid. So as a byproduct of the phosphate fertilizer industry, it's considered a hazardous waste, and it's very expensive to dispose of. But they have found that if diluted, in theory, and it's an acid, first of all. So if it's put into our water system, it is so diluted that it becomes safe. But I will say, everyone can go research this and look at themselves, but it does come in like cement bags with skull and crossbones on the front, and they do have to wear hazmat suits to put it into our water. They're supposed to titrate it, and I think what's interesting, we're supposed to target 0.7 milligrams per liter. I've been involved in some educational campaigns and have tested communities surrounding Portland. It's very hard to keep it in range, and so there are some communities testing as high, we've seen as 2.2 milligrams per liter, which definitely falls into, based on the science and literature, a more concerning zone for neurocognitive issues.
Never, ever, ever, ever again drink water out of the tap. And the reason for this is, look, if having a water filtration system is not in the budget, get a Brita water filter that at a minimum gets chlorine out of your water. If you have seen the clinical trials, the clinical studies in the last 15 months coming out on fluoride, they are absolutely devastating. They're devastating. Harvard University just launched a study through the Freedom of Information Act. We sued the CDC and the FDA, and we actually got the research that they kept suppressed on water. If you don't believe me, you can go to the National Institute of Health, look up the study yourself. There is 0 levels of safe fluoride in human beings. It's a neurotoxin. They find that the higher the fluoride concentration in the water, the lower the IQ in every state. So stop drinking tap water.